TechDaily.ai, your source for technical information. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into something you probably hear a lot if you listen to audio online: podcast advertising, sponsorships. We want to explore what makes it work, why brands are so interested, and really what the latest findings suggest about how you, the listener, actually feel about it all.
Exactly. We've been digging into some interesting research, looking at industry trends in this whole area. It's changing fast. So our goal today is really to unpack what the data tells us about connecting with audiences through audio, what actually makes a difference.
Okay, let's do that. So first off, who are we talking about? Who is the typical podcast listener based on, well, recent studies? We're seeing some clear patterns. Like one analysis pointed to a really young audience, something like 80% were in that 18 to 25 range.
Yeah, a big chunk. And slightly more female, maybe 52% or so. What was also interesting in that particular group was how many were students? Nearly 70%.
Right? Which maybe explains the income levels noted. A majority reported under 10,000 monthly. So that gives us a picture, at least from that snapshot.
Yeah.
Young, maybe students, possibly budget conscious.
It certainly paints a picture of that specific group. But beyond demographics, it's their habits that are really telling for advertisers. Engagement seems high. Around 40% in one study listen daily. It's not just a weekly thing for a lot of people.
Daily listening, wow. Part of the routine.
Yeah, and that means they're noticing the ads. Almost 80% said they notice advertisements while listening.
80%, that's huge. So people aren't just tuning them out completely. They know they're there. And platforms. Where are they typically listening?
Well, in the groups looked at, one platform definitely stood out. Spotify was the preference for like over 70%.
Okay, so we've got a young-ish, frequent listener base, very aware of the ads, often on platforms like Spotify.
Right. Not a passive audience just letting it wash over them.
So why is podcast advertising getting so much buzz? What makes it different from, say, hearing an ad on the radio or seeing one online?
Well, based on what we're seeing, a huge factor is how the ads are integrated. Unlike, a sudden, loud radio ad, podcast ads, especially the host read ones, can feel woven into the conversation. Less disruptive.
More organic, maybe.
Yeah.
And that connects to the host, doesn't it? That feeling of trust.
Absolutely. That's key. Listeners build this sort of relationship with hosts. You feel like you know them. So when a host you trust recommends something, it just lands differently than a random announcer. That authenticity piece comes up again and again in the research.
Plus, podcasts themselves are often super specific, right? Like shows about very niche hobbies or topics.
Exactly. That's a goldmine for brands. If you want to reach people really passionate about, competitive dog grooming, there's probably a podcast for it. That ability to target specific engaged groups is a massive advantage.
And the format itself allows for more storytelling, too.
Right. A host can share a quick story about using a product, build that emotional connection. It makes the brand way more memorable than just like a quick slogan. That definitely helps with brand recall compared to, say, a fleeting banner ad.
Okay, so listeners notice the ads. They often trust the host. The medium allows for storytelling and niche targeting. But what makes an ad good from the listener's point of view? What do they actually care about?
Yeah, studies looked into that. When asked about production quality, two things really floated to the top. First, maybe not, is audio quality. If the ad sounds bad, scratchy, too loud, too quiet.
People tune out. Makes sense. You're listening for the audio experience.
Exactly. The other big one, tied for number one actually, was the ad creative messaging. What does the ad actually say? Is it clear? Is it interesting? Is it relevant? Sound and message, basically.
And where did the host fit in? That authenticity factor.
That was right up there too, ranked third. So sound and message are critical, but hearing that the host seems to genuinely back the product, still very important to listeners. Things like how long the ad was, or if it had fancy sound effects, those were seen as less crucial than getting the basics right. Sound, message, authenticity.
Interesting. So production matters, authenticity matters. What about the style of the ad? What grabs attention?
This is where the emotional side comes in. It wasn't just about information.
Okay, so not just facts and figures.
Not primarily, no. The types of ads ranked highest for grabbing attention were funny ads and emotional ads, tied for the top spot.
Humor and heart. Makes sense. Connect on a human level.
Precisely. Informative ads were still valued. They came in third. But it seems like making people laugh or feel something is particularly powerful in this intimate audio space. Ads that were just short or tried to be interactive, like click this link now, they ranked lower. Listeners seem to prefer engaging content within the ad itself.
All right, treat the ad like content too, not just a quick interruption. And overall, do listeners feel like they understand this whole podcast ad thing?
It seems so. One measure put general knowledge about podcast advertising as good on average, which suggests, listeners aren't completely naive about it. They have some experience, probably some expectations.
Okay, so for a brand thinking about this, or maybe a podcaster looking for sponsors,
Yeah.
what's the bottom line? What are the real benefits?
Well, for brands, the number one perceived benefit that came up was improving brand awareness. About a third pointed to that. But it wasn't just awareness. Higher conversion rates and increased website traffic were also seen as major benefits. Pretty significant results.
So it's not just about getting your name out there. It can actually drive action.
Seems that way. A lot of listeners reported taking some kind of action after hearing a podcast ad. And maybe just as importantly, many said it gave them a more positive view of the brand itself. That kind of positive association is really valuable.
Definitely. Now, flipping it, for the podcaster, how do you even figure out what a sponsorship is worth? It's not just about download numbers, is it?
Oh, definitely not. You have to look at the whole picture. Your audience, who are they? How engaged are they? The host's influence, any social media promotion tied in, website traffic. It takes research to see what the market rates are, sure, but also really understanding your unique value. You don't want to undersell yourself, but you also don't want to, nickel and dime sponsors for every little mention.
Finding that sweet spot. And I guess underpinning all of this is measurement.
Absolutely critical. Non-negotiable, really. If you want sponsors to stick around or invest more, you have to track results. Website clicks from a specific link, promo code usage, leads generated, sales, whatever aligns with the sponsor's goals. You can't prove the value without tracking it.
So podcasters need the right tools. Unique codes, landing pages, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's not just about hitting play on the ad. To get those longer-term deals, you often need to be proactive. Show the sponsor the results. Provide reports, sponsorship fulfillment reports, they're often called. Show them the value they got. That builds trust and opens doors for renewal.
It's about proving that return on investment consistently. Okay, thinking bigger picture, where does podcast advertising fit in the whole marketing mix? Does it work best alone?
The research suggests combination is powerful. Podcast ads paired with social media, that was seen as the most effective combo by a majority in one study.
Yeah, I can see that. The audio connection plus the visual or interactive side of social. Makes sense.
And certain industries seem to be perceived as a particularly good fit. Technology and digital products. They consistently ranked high as benefiting most from podcast ads.
Which kind of aligns with the listener profiles we sometimes see. It's also amazing to think about the platforms that enable all this. Apple Podcasts, essentially starting it all in iTunes way back.
Right, back in 2005. And then Spotify making that huge push around 2019, bringing podcasts to their massive user base, and Google Podcasts joining in too.
These platforms really built the infrastructure, didn't they? Making it easy to find shows, listen, subscribe. That's what allowed this whole advertising ecosystem to grow.
Yeah, they're the crucial link between creators, listeners, and ultimately the advertisers.
But it's not all simple, right? There must be challenges or complexities.
For sure. Measuring the direct impact on something broad like brand awareness can still be tricky. It's often part of a bigger campaign, so isolating the podcast effect takes work.
And the research itself has limits, like any research. Small sample sizes sometimes, relying on people reporting their own behavior.
Important caveats. The findings give us strong clues, but they aren't always the final word. Another thing, while niche targeting is a strength, its effectiveness wasn't rated as, universally amazing by everyone. Maybe half saw it as moderately effective, so just being niche isn't enough. The ad still has to be good.
And what about comparing it to traditional ads? Does it actually sway buying decisions more?
The results there were a bit mixed. About a third said yes, podcast ads influence them more, but another third said, well, it depends. Depends on the product, the ad, the show. So it's powerful, but maybe not automatically more influential than every other type of ad in every single case.
So effectiveness isn't a given. It depends on doing it right.
Pretty much. It comes back to those key things: authenticity, good creative, solid audio, smart targeting.
Okay, so if we pull all this together, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive into podcast ads?
I think the big picture is pretty clear. Podcast advertising works. It's particularly good for building brand awareness and reaching specific engaged audiences. But success hinges on getting key things right. Engaging ads, ads that inform, that feel authentic, especially with host reads, and definitely good audio quality.
So focus on those elements, respect the listener and the medium.
That seems to be the formula, yeah.
This has been really insightful. We've looked at the listeners, why podcast ads can be so effective, what makes a good ad, the business side for brands and creators, and some of the challenges. It's definitely a unique space.
It really is. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening and for brands. Given how much listeners seem to value that authenticity and connection in this kind of intimate space, how can advertising evolve even further? How can it feel less like an ad and more like, I don't know, a genuinely valuable part of the listening experience?
Something to chew on. This podcast is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyperconverged in VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox cluster, AI servers, SA365, a turnkey security appliance, and public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com.